Anthony Quinn and Charles Bronson stood as towering symbols of masculine intensity in 20th century cinema. Both men projected strength forged by hardship, faces shaped by labor rather than privilege. For decades, Quinn spoke freely about art, love, politics, and pain. But when it came to Bronson, he was noticeably quiet. The silence fueled speculation. Were they rivals? Were they distant? Or was there something deeper, more personal beneath Quinn's restraint? Only later in life did Anthony Quinn finally break that silence, offering reflections that surprised many. His words were not bitter, competitive, or theatrical. Instead, they were thoughtful, restrained, and rooted in shared experience. What Quinn revealed was not gossip, but understanding, a recognition of a fellow survivor shaped by poverty, discipline, and distrust. In speaking about Bronson, Quinn wasn't rewriting history. He was humanizing a man the world thought it already understood, revealing the cost of strength and the solitude behind it. Roots in struggle: Anthony Quinn's early life. Anthony Quinn was born Manuel Antonio Rodolfo Quinn Oaxaca on April 21, 1915, in Chihuahua, Mexico, to a Mexican mother and a father of Mexican-Irish descent. His childhood was defined by instability and hardship. After moving to Los Angeles, the family lived in poverty, and Quinn worked from a young age to survive. He boxed, labored in construction, and took any job that paid, experiences that later infused his performances with physical authenticity. Yet Quinn's life was not defined by brute endurance alone. He showed an early sensitivity to art and form, eventually studying architecture under Frank Lloyd Wright. It was Wright who recognized Quinn's expressive power and urged him toward acting. That encouragement changed everything. Quinn carried with him the understanding that survival required reinvention. This philosophy would define his career and later shape his respect for Charles Bronson, another man who had clawed his way up from nothing. Breaking through barriers: the making of a serious actor. Quinn began acting in the 1930s, often trapped in stereotypical ethnic roles that reflected Hollywood's narrow imagination. He endured years of marginalization, determined to outgrow the limitations imposed on him. His persistence paid off in the 1950s when his talent became undeniable. His performance in Viva Zapata, 1952, earned him an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, making him the first Mexican-born actor to win an Oscar. He followed that triumph with another Oscar for Lust for Life, 1956, portraying painter Paul Gauguin with raw emotional depth. These victories were more than personal milestones. They were acts of defiance against an industry that had underestimated him. Quinn understood what it meant to fight for legitimacy, a struggle that mirrored Charles Bronson's own path. This shared battle for respect would later form the unspoken bond between them. Zorba and beyond, a man of many identities. Anthony Quinn reached iconic status with Zorba the Greek, 1964, a role that became inseparable from his public image. Zorba embodied joy, pain, philosophy, and defiance, a celebration of life in all its contradictions. The role earned Quinn an Academy Award nomination and introduced him to global audiences. Yet even as he became mythic, Quinn resisted being confined. Over a career spanning more than 150 films, he portrayed revolutionaries, artists, warriors, and spiritual figures, including Barabbas in Barabbas, 1961, and Auda Abu Tayi in Lawrence of Arabia, 1962. Beyond acting, Quinn painted, sculpted, and wrote, believing creativity demanded constant exploration. This refusal to be reduced to one identity stood in contrast to Charles Bronson, whom Hollywood relentlessly typecast. Quinn recognized that Bronson bore the weight of a singular image, and he respected the discipline required to endure it. Love, chaos, and consequence. Quinn's personal life. Anthony Quinn's personal life was as expansive and turbulent as his screen roles. His first marriage to Catherine DeMille in 1937 connected him to Hollywood royalty and provided early stability. Together they had 5 children, but Quinn's growing fame and infidelity eroded the marriage, ending in divorce in 1965. His second marriage to Jolanda Adlori brought renewed passion and 3 more children, yet it too was marked by betrayal, including long-term affairs that resulted in additional children. Quinn openly admitted his flaws later in life, acknowledging the pain he caused. His relationships reflected the same restlessness that fueled his creativity. By the time he married Catherine Benvin late in life, Quinn was confronting the consequences of decades of impulsive choices. This self-awareness shaped his later reflections, especially his empathy for Bronson, whose emotional guardedness Quinn understood as a form of survival. The silence around Charles Bronson. For years, Anthony Quinn was asked about his contemporaries, yet Charles Bronson remained a subject he avoided. The two men were often compared, rugged, intense, physically imposing actors who embodied danger and masculinity. Only later did Quinn explain why he had stayed silent. He did not see Bronson as a rival, nor as a friend easily summarized. Instead, he saw someone whose life demanded respect rather than commentary. When Quinn finally spoke, he dismissed the caricature of Bronson as a mindless tough guy. "People thought Charles was stone," Quinn said, "but that was armor." He recognized in Bronson a man shaped by deprivation and distrust. Quinn understood that some men survive by building walls, and that tearing them down for public consumption would be a betrayal rather than a revelation. Discipline in silence. Quinn on Bronson's craft. Anthony Quinn rejected the notion that Charles Bronson was a limited actor. He praised Bronson's economy of expression, noting that every movement and pause carried intention. "Charles didn't waste words," Quinn observed. "That takes intelligence." Unlike Quinn's expansive, expressive style, Bronson relied on restraint. Quinn admired this discipline, recognizing that it required immense control. Bronson's power came from stillness, from the sense that violence or emotion was always contained just beneath the surface. Quinn believed audiences responded to that authenticity. Bronson looked like a man who had lived the pain his characters endured. For Quinn, this was not simplicity. It was mastery. In an industry that rewarded spectacle, Bronson chose minimalism. Quinn saw that choice not as limitation, but as an act of artistic defiance rooted in self-knowledge. Toughness as self-preservation. Quinn also addressed Bronson's reputation as distant and unapproachable. He believed it was misunderstood. "When you come from hunger," Quinn said, "you don't trust easily." Bronson's toughness, in Quinn's view, was not arrogance, but self-protection. Hollywood had a way of reshaping people, softening them into marketable versions of themselves. Bronson resisted that process fiercely. Quinn contrasted their personalities openly. He thrived on chaos, conversation, and excess. Bronson preferred solitude and control. Yet Quinn never judged that difference. He respected it. To him, Bronson's distance was a boundary, not a flaw. It allowed Bronson to maintain integrity in an industry that often stripped it away. Quinn's reflections reframed Bronson not as cold, but cautious, a man guarding what little peace he had earned. Legacy of the working man. Perhaps Quinn's most striking observation concerned Bronson's cultural legacy. He believed Bronson became a symbol not of violence, but of endurance. Audiences around the world saw in him the working man who refuses to be broken. Bronson's characters were often pushed to extremes, responding to injustice with brutal resolve. Quinn understood why that resonated. It wasn't fantasy, it was recognition. Bronson carried the physical truth of labor, struggle, and survival in his body. Quinn saw that honesty as rare. He wasn't pretending, Quinn said. He was remembering. In that sense, Bronson represented a kind of cinematic truth that could not be taught. It had to be lived. Quinn's respect was rooted not in fame, but in authenticity, the one currency both men valued above all else.